Chapter 33 The Magic of the Mundane. Let's play a little psychological game. Imagine darkness all around you, except for a single blinding light directly ahead. The source of the light is obscured by a ship's helm, which appears to you as a blackened silhouette against the glow. Within the disk at the hub of the helm, a stencil in the shape of an inverted pentagram has been cut out, allowing the light to shine through. I want to use this image as a means of communicating several ideas by symbolic representation. The first idea is that we can't see the light in its totality. The finite cannot grasp the infinite. In attempting to understand the infinite, we must resort to approximations, due to the limited nature of our minds and perceptions. All of our hard science must be understood within a metaphysical framework that is, of necessity, abstract. Symbolically, the bright light obscured by an object reminds us of this fundamental blind spot in our awareness. As physical creatures, we must learn to live with, and even appreciate, the impenetrable mystery at the heart of existence. Why a helm in particular? Because life is an experience of progress. We are each on an individual voyage of discovery, sailing our ships ever forward. We are never in stasis, never sitting still with perfect understanding, but always progressing towards a total illumination that we never quite reach, always learning, but never privy to the whole story. A steering wheel is built to be turned. We must have an ever-present readiness to alter our bearing. In other words, we must always be willing to reassess our existing views in light of new information and, when necessary, to change our minds. Otherwise, we are merely sailing out into the darkness of delusion. Notice this is not a wheel from just any vehicle. It's a ship's helm. Life at sea is lonely and dangerous. A sailor's companions are few, and he may face stormy seas. In a similar fashion, we must stand apart from the masses, forming our individual opinions and resisting herd mentality. As a consequence, we must be willing to face hurtful interference and even social exile, because our views may not be popular or tolerated by the masses. Don't sail this ship unless you're prepared to accept the risks. The significance of the inverted pentagram lies in the relationship of the infinite to the finite, of non-duality to duality. The veiling of the infinite creates a self-other distinction, which inexorably brings about an adversarial universe, a satanic universe, to state it theatrically. All things are as they are by virtue of the continual conversion of energy. As creatures, the relationship of predator and prey is unavoidably woven into the nature of our existence. Generally speaking, conflict is a fact of life that must be faced and embraced. Inevitably, a free thinker faces hostility for his refusal to fall in line with accepted thinking. Though he may live in a civilization that tolerates individuality, he must be ready in all circumstances to face opposition with courage. Though he is ethical by his own volition, he may be branded as a villain for his basic non-conformity to established dogmas. He is out in the dark, alone, pursuing the truth. The human being is a herd animal, and not all men and women are capable or willing to step outside of the safety that the herd offers. For this reason, there may always be the exoteric and the esoteric, common beliefs that allow man to be a happy, socially acceptable animal who doesn't have to think too much, and deeper mysteries for those who are self-realized enough to cognize them, secrets hidden in plain sight. I call this the dark wheel. It's not a term I invented. In my early teens, I read a memorable science fiction novella called The Dark Wheel, 1984, by Robert Holdstock. It was written as a companion to a groundbreaking computer game called Elite, and its purpose was to add substance to the game's theme of interplanetary trade and piracy, where players progressed from their initial rating of harmless to dangerous, deadly, and for the skilled few, elite. In Holdstock's story, the Dark Wheel was a secret society of elitists concerned with unraveling the secrets of the universe. This quest was not fleshed out in any detail, but the sense of mystery made it all the more memorable. I decided to borrow the term the Dark Wheel, not because Holdstock had something profound to say, but because I can't seem to shake the relevance those words have for my personal philosophical outlook. If it seems childish to use science fiction as a basis for a serious philosophy, one should remember that all the gods and goddesses of antiquity from which we extract symbolic relevance are also fictitious. I designed this symbol in 2011 when I was toying with creating an identity for my worldview. I forgot about the symbol for a while, and when I came back to it at a later date, an interesting effect occurred while gazing at it. I felt inspired. It was as if the symbol was imbued with power, and it was working upon me. Of course, there was nothing paranormal afoot. The symbol was exuding power for the simple reason that I had previously empowered it with meaning. I had encoded in it the nature of man's relationship to the infinite, and the most important character traits he requires as a truth seeker in a hostile world. I saw myself in this symbol and felt a renewed sense of the value of my path. All symbols work like this. When a Christian chooses to wear a cross pendant, he is doing so because he wishes to identify with the meaning behind the cross. Atheists sometimes mock the symbol as the first-century equivalent of wearing an electric chair around one's neck. But to the Christian, this is a symbol of great power, reminding him of the sacrifice he believes God made on his behalf. Protestants add an additional layer of meaning by excluding the body of Jesus from the cross. In part, this is due to their rejection of the use of images of God, but it is also a statement that their Christ has risen from the dead. Some use symbols as charms or talismans. This is not quite as superstitious as it first appears to the rational mind. Wearing a symbol or gazing at it gives you a certain feeling, and that feeling affects your behavior. The mystically minded may be inclined to believe that symbols contain supernatural power, but the nature of that power is merely applied psychology. A pentagram might evoke feelings of revulsion or dread in a Christian, but this is entirely down to the meaning he has chosen to place upon the symbol, a meaning usually formed by exposure to anti-occult propaganda and horror movies. A friend of mine once told me an amusing story about wearing a pentagram ring to work. A Christian co-worker saw it and remarked, "I didn't know you were Jewish." The Jewish symbol, in case you don't know, is a six-pointed star. When a person gazes upon a Christian cross, an inverted pentagram, a Taoist Taijitu, yin-yang, or even a big yellow McDonald's M, it evokes a psychological response depending upon what meaning the observer has attached to the symbol. In the case of McDonald's, the meaning is subliminally injected. One of the company's sustained advertising campaigns involved embedding the statement, "I'm loving it," into the symbol, using a torrent of television advertising that associated the phrase with the symbol. McDonald's restaurants then relied on the prominent display of the company logo on the roofs of their buildings to charm passers-by into dining there. This is one example of how we are used and abused by the holders of this esoteric knowledge. But the same knowledge can be used not only to disentangle oneself from the web of influence that catches the masses, but also for one's own personal empowerment. The practical value of a visual symbol is its ability to condense a variety of ideas into a simple, memorable aesthetic form, and to serve as a reminder of them all to the beholder. My symbol, the Dark Wheel, communicates daring to stand alone, rejecting the conditioning of your past, grasping the fundamental reality of the infinite as the basis of your existence, integrating the adversarial side of life into this non-dual awareness, appreciating the predicament of living with impenetrable mystery, flowing with the forward motion of knowledge instead of turning present assertions into dogma, admitting the subjective nature of your relationship to truth and being ever vigilant for the tides of change. Without words, the symbol serves to maintain my focus upon all of this. I have simply engineered it as a tool for personal growth. It's also important to remember that one can be too serious. There is a deliberate sense of fun and rascality intended in giving this symbol an air of the sinister. Branding is important, and nothing attracts attention more than a sense of the forbidden. Like many occultists, I prefer dark aesthetics, both for their theatrical value and because black relates to the obscure, the hidden, the unknown, while white is often the signature color of purity, and purity is often a mask for hypocrisy. If you are entirely new to magic, you can use the dark wheel as your first conscious magical working. If you resonate with the meaning of the symbol, make it your own. Draw your own version. Make changes to it that are more in keeping with your individual worldview, or design an entirely different symbol altogether. Think carefully about what aspects of life you place great importance in, or crystallize a long-term goal that you wish to accomplish. Search for a way to represent this aesthetically. In choosing or inventing a symbol, listen to your gut feelings. Colors and shapes speak to us on a primal level. In the science fiction movie The Black Hole, 1979, the good robot and the evil robot are instantly recognizable in their respective roles, even before they speak or act, because of what their physical appearance alone communicates to the viewer. Vincent is grey in color, has large cartoon-like eyes, and his short, squat body is mostly outlined in friendly curves. Maximilian's metal body is red, tall and broad-shouldered, made up of straight lines and harsh corners. His head is a trapezoid, a shape that evokes a feeling of wrongness because it is like a distorted rectangle or an incomplete pyramid. And his single eye is a soulless horizontal strip that glows an angry bright red. You will see this instinctual aesthetic awareness employed again and again in science fiction films. There is something instantly friendly about C-3PO, but from the first moment you see Darth Vader, assuming you grew up with the original Star Wars trilogy, you sense he's evil incarnate. The same aesthetic principle is at work in nature. Once, while I was walking near a lake, I came across a family of swans resting on the grass by the shore. As I approached, one of the large parent birds started waddling slowly towards me, head lowered, wings extended upwards in an unusual V shape. I intuitively picked up on this as a threat, even though I had never before seen this posture. The bird was clearly saying, "Do not mess with my family." It struck me that the shape the bird was making with its wings was much like horns. It instinctively knew the effect this pose would have, and I instinctively felt that effect. This is the primal significance of the inverted pentagram. It evokes a feeling that a traditional pentagram with its single point facing up does not. The best symbol is the kind that nags at you until you embrace it, where it almost feels as if the symbol chose you rather than you chose it. This illusion is created by the primal draw of the aesthetic form. The fact that I am drawn to identify with an image of horns extended says something important about my character, that I have accepted the hostile aspect of human nature and integrated it into my personality. Whatever symbol you invent or borrow, see that it speaks to you on a primal level. As time goes by, you will experience how your symbol acts as a means of empowerment for the desired direction of your life. Wait a minute, you may object. There's nothing magical about this. You yourself admitted that it was just applied psychology. I want to experience something paranormal. The two sides of magic are not separate, and one of the essential steps in the path of a magician is developing an appreciation that life is magical in an entirely mundane sense. This observation is not easily appreciated in our scientifically oriented culture, where our focus is on understanding life by breaking everything down and labeling the parts. While that approach does yield much knowledge, it's easy to miss the value of examining life as an experience of wholeness. When we stand on a mountaintop and gaze in awe at the view, what we experience in the mind will not be understood by examining the composition of the soil or by knowing that the water running down the river consists of 2 parts hydrogen to 1 part oxygen. As rational Westerners, it is easy to dismiss the term magic because of its mystical heritage, but there really is no better word to describe this side of life experience. Life casts spells upon us all the time. Overcast weather makes us feel gloomy. Sunshine makes us feel joyful. A woman who is skilled at using her body can make a man's pulse race with sexual excitement. We are constantly at the mercy of all manner of influences. Being a magician means having a much greater awareness than the average person of the forces that move us. Not only does this empower us to resist the natural currents of life, if we so choose, but it also gives us the power to influence the lives of others. People are generally predictable because they unconsciously go with the flow. This makes them controllable simply by making subtle adjustments to their circumstances. Having this power does not make a magician evil, any more than having a knife in your kitchen drawer makes you liable to stab a family member. Magic should be undertaken with a great sense of responsibility. For the most part, my own efforts at magic consist of steering my circumstances towards the most productive outcome. I have a personal axiom: act, don't react. This is easy to practice when my ego is in sync with my monistic outlook on life. There is no individual self, so there is no need to react vindictively to anyone. However, I am not always so mindful. Sometimes I really do have to hold back the natural, predictable tendency to lash out verbally. In those circumstances, the only thing stopping me is the development of this useful habit. The energy of my anger exists, but it goes into an internal buffer, waiting for direction from me. I coolly analyze the situation, weighing the consequences of expressing my anger against the consequences of remaining calm. And then I act responsibly, based on what I want to happen, not on what the runaway voice in my head is urging me to do. Act, don't react isn't synonymous with suppress, don't express. Suppressed emotion is dangerous because it is unresolved and tends to trickle out in day-to-day living, adversely affecting all your relationships. The emotional block has to be cleared, and any method that helps you achieve this safely is perfectly valid. Act, don't react applies to the whole spectrum of behavior, not just to anger. The internal landscape of your mind is something to be tended like a garden, not allowed to run amok, overgrown with weeds. I've had some fun learning to adopt this attitude. In my late 30s, I started riding a bicycle to my job every day. For a particular period, I was subjected to mockery by a group of teenagers on their way to school each morning. They knew my identity because they had previously attended the school where I'm employed. I guess they thought it was novel to be able to poke fun at an employee without consequence to themselves. It wasn't like I could put them in detention. Unfortunately, the geography of my town meant that there was no alternative route I could take. So I endured this treatment silently for a couple of weeks, feeling the anger gradually build up inside me. It was especially frustrating that my position of responsibility at a school meant that I had to appear angelically blameless in public. Eventually, I decided to risk a strategy that I hoped would solve the matter quickly. I was going to scare the living daylights out of them. The next morning, one of the teenagers was walking alone, and he called out in his usual mocking tone. This time I stopped the bike, turned around, and unleashed a torrent of verbal abuse. It was an abrupt personality shift from the calm, well-mannered man he had known in his previous school into a thug. I don't recall much of what I said, but the underlying impression I intended to leave with him was this: "You don't really know me, and you've no idea what I'm capable of doing." Before I had finished 3 sentences, he had turned away from me and scampered off with his tail between his legs. I dared to think, result! But that was just the beginning. I had severely miscalculated. Once word got to the rest of the gang, their torments multiplied. Now that they had successfully got a rise out of me, they thought it would be great fun to have a repeat performance. In my ineptitude, I tried the same ruse again, which naturally failed. After that, I made a promise to myself. No matter what they do, they will never, ever get another reaction from me. They tried and tried, but I kept my cool. The only real solution for me was to change the time I cycled to work in the mornings. I hated doing that because I was letting them win. Notice how active my ego is throughout. I wish I could tell you I handled the situation by informing my ego that it doesn't have to triumph because it isn't the real me. I wish I could say I endured the boys' taunts without feeling any need to get my own back. But my sense of self, or non-self, wasn't sufficiently developed at the time. Even so, I knew my own limits, so I took the only action I could take to defuse the situation. I still encountered the teens now and again when coming home from work in the afternoons. And they continued to holler at me, for months even, a little too simple-minded to realize that I was onto their game. Eventually they found something better to do with their time, as was inevitable. So that's an example of a failed application of magic for your amusement. But a lesson learned the hard way is a mistake that won't be repeated. And I learned a lot from that episode, about predicting behavior in others, about becoming aware of my own limits, and about diffusing an emotional time bomb. Greater magic is best applied in situations where there is no lesser magical alternative. To throw a curse sounds objectionable, but that's a bit like saying a police officer should never, under any circumstances, fire his gun. What if you find yourself stuck in a life situation where you are continually at the mercy of a physically abusive person and there is no viable exit? Wouldn't it be appropriate to curse him if there's nothing else you can do to free yourself? Is this even any different from a Christian who prays for God's help with the situation, then thanks him after the abuser ends up being run over by a car? It also sounds somewhat nefarious to perform a lust ritual to attract the attentions of a woman. But when females commonly dress in a manner that broadcasts a mating signal to all males in their vicinity, the question must be asked: who is really working magic on whom? This illustrates the entwined nature of lesser and greater magic. Life is magical. It's beside the point whether normal or paranormal influences are used as an aid to achieving a goal. Either way, it's witchery, seduction, manipulation, whichever synonym you prefer. Before I secured a publishing contract for this book, I was considering self-publishing it. That meant it would be my responsibility to prepare an eye-catching cover. Not being a professional artist, I ploughed through thousands of stock images online, looking for one that had just the right psychological effect on me. This effect would hopefully be reflected into the minds of my intended audience. Make no mistake, my aim was to do everything in my power to bewitch you into lifting this book off the shelf, or, as is now most often the case, clicking on its image on a website. I planned to use the obscure powers of aesthetics to influence how you felt, and I intended that feeling to drive you to action in keeping with my will. That is magic. Don't be offended. This is how the world works. If you search your own motivations with great honesty, you will find many examples of how you have played these tricks upon others. It can be as simple as grooming yourself in front of a mirror in the morning, or choosing a particular outfit from the wardrobe because you want the aesthetics of your body to have a particular effect upon those you will encounter during the day ahead. Denying this side of life is like asking a peacock to stop showing off its feathers. When I put on my motorcycle jacket, this causes me to feel different about myself because it changes the shape of my body. It also alters others' perceptions of me. The armor in the shoulders causes me to appear more physically powerful, while also making my waist appear narrower by contrast. When I ride the bike down the street and a little kid sticks his thumb up at me in greeting, he is doing so because I have become cool in his estimation. Bike and rider are not separate in his eyes. For the duration of the encounter, the animalistic growl of the engine becomes an aspect of who I am, more so even than my face, which is obscured behind a helmet visor. Had I been walking down the street in ordinary clothes, I would not have been saluted, let alone noticed, by the youngster. The magical effect lies in the combination of obscure separate elements that create an aesthetic whole. My interest in magic originally stemmed from dabbling in psychokinesis, which is, of course, causing change by obscure means, the definition of magic. I remember the perspective I had when I was just starting out, prior to any successful experimentation, the sense that life would never be the same if I could just break through. While that consequence proved to be true, it may surprise the uninitiated to learn that even something like PK eventually becomes mundane when practiced often enough. Every experience, no matter how initially mind-blowing, is eventually integrated as a part of everyday life. My interest in PK was philosophical, and once I had extracted the clues that PK provided about the nature of reality, my will to obsessively practice it diminished, as did any further progress. I know my dismissive attitude is hard for someone on the outside to understand, but no experience of life holds its thrill forever, not even this. PK provides no greater a repository for endless excitement than skydiving holds for someone who has jumped from a plane 500 times. The true value of PK is the long-term, life-changing benefits of such an initiation into a new perspective on the universe. A magician is commonly thought to be one who is exclusively preoccupied with the paranormal, but he is actually one who is equally interested in the magical nature of ordinary life. Life is magical because it is filled with obscurity. The magician's sixth sense is a highly developed awareness of the commonly unnoticed aspects of life, and this elevated vantage point allows him to influence life to a greater degree than the average person. To what end? That depends on you. The path of the magician can be a descent into egocentric madness, or one's self-centered motivations can be counterbalanced with selfless love. It all depends on what the word I means to you.